the left is ratcheting up their attack on children because they see the strength of the parents. It's why the FBI called parents who were challenging school board members domestic terrorists or whatever it was, extremists that they called us. It's because they understand that we pose an existential threat to their Marxist agenda. This is their last chance. This is the last thing they must capture in order to topple the civil institutions that undergird our free society. If they can do that, then we have lost the United States of America.
Marxists are indoctrinating our children. They have embedded themselves into our institutions, and they are running our country into the ground. And no, it is not a conspiracy theory. And no, I will not be ostracized for saying it, because guess what? You have to care to be ostracized, and I really don't care. I'm going to say it because it is true. And I remember several years ago, one of my aunts and I were talking, and she was watching what was happening to President Trump. And now I guess we can see it is continuing to happen to him. But when the institutions were basically targeting him after his presidency in 2016, and they continually targeted him, my aunt said to me, this reminds me so much of what was happening in Cuba, you know, during the time that Fidel was rising to power. And it was different, but the situation within the institutions was the same. Because once the institutions were owned by the Marxists, by the radicals, once those institutions were no longer in the hands of the people, but in the hands of a political party, you would lose. That was it. Your nation, if you could not hold it, if you cannot hold it, would be fundamentally changed forever. At the end of the Cold War, so many Americans believed, you know what? We don't need to worry about communism anymore. It's been defeated. I remember that. I remember how excited everybody was to watch the Berlin Wall topple. And everybody thought, oh, I got to get a piece of that. That won't exist anymore. That Iron Curtain is gone. But like anything, it's an idea. It's an ideology. It's like a virus in a weird way. One that has seeped into systems and accelerated itself in a new form, I believe. This idea of being wokeism, this idea of separating yourself from, separate the children from the family, separate the children from the church. That's what I am going to be discussing today with a remarkable woman, Liz Wheeler, who is going to be on the show. She is a true patriot. She is a friend. And she is somebody who is trying to warn parents, Americans, anybody that'll listen here in this country about what is happening in our system. She wrote a book, Hide Your Children, exposing the Marxists behind the attack on America's kids. And you are not going to want to miss this show at all, because folks, this is about your family. This is about your children. These are about your kids and your relatives and your nation and the future of our country. The future of our country. And we need to stand up and speak out against this. And I want to highlight those who are doing it, like Liz Wheeler. Folks, gold and silver allow you to protect what you've worked so hard for, and it gives you back that control and the privacy that you need. Remember what I've said before, diversify, diversify, diversify. I say that for a reason, because we've seen what's been happening throughout the globe, whether it's Canada with Justin Trudeau, what a weirdo, no wonder his wife's leaving him, and, trying to seize bank accounts, or whether it's, here in the United States where we have, yes, quote unquote, crazy woke banks or woke corporations that want to remove you or your family members from their institutions because guess what? You don't agree with their Marxist ways. Well, folks, you don't need to worry about that anymore. Not to that extent. If you protect your money and your assets, and you can do that with Allegiance Gold. Don't just trust me. Go on and investigate for yourself. Allegiance Gold is the way to do it. They can help you protect your IRA or your 401k with physical gold and silver. They can have it delivered securely right to your front door. And you can get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. And Allegiance Gold will educate you on the benefits of physical gold and silver because they care. Allegiance Gold has the highest ratings in the industry, 5 stars with TrustLink, AAA rated with the Business Consumer Alliance, and they're A+ rated with the Better Business Bureau. So get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. So don't wait. Call or click today. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, SARA. No H, or go to protectwithsara.com. We can't control the Biden administration, folks, but we can prepare. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, SARA, no H, or go to protectwithsara.com. Well, I'm so happy to have you on the show, Liz Wheeler. I am a big fan of yours. I am one of the millions of people that like to watch you on Instagram and listen to what you have to say. I think you have a very, very important voice in America right now, especially in our battle against what I believe is a radical Marxist leftist regime that has infiltrated our nation in such a way that, I think we're having a difficult time as a country repairing the damage that they have done. And congratulations on your book.
Yes, for the last year, I've been working on this book. I've actually kept it a secret for a while because one of my pet peeves is when someone announces a book and I'm really excited about it. And then I go to buy it on Amazon and I'm like, oh shoot, it's not out for like 9 months. I have to wait all this time. So I decided not to announce too early. I just let everyone know a couple weeks ago, and it's out the end of September. So you can pre-order it now and it'll be in your mailbox in just a couple weeks. You don't have to wait if you are as impatient as I am. But yes, this book, let me tell you, it started out as an observation that I, like a lot of parents in our country, had, maybe looking over our children's shoulders on Zoom school during COVID, seeing whether it was critical race theory or trans ideology or just good old-fashioned moral relativism, your truth, my truth is better than the truth, being poured into our children's mind. And it felt like a concerted effort, different than the way that children had been targeted in the past. So I set out to find out if it was a concerted effort, if that observation was accurate. And what I found is the answer to that question wasn't so much of a why is this happening in a concerted effort, but a who is behind this.
Right.
So what I do in this book is I delve into the origin. This isn't new. The left has been attempting to re-engineer our society for the last century, really. Unfortunately, they've been quite successful at it. They've captured what I call 4 out of 5 of our major foundational cultural institutions. They've captured the media, captured the education system, as we all know. They've captured a lot of religious institutions. They've captured the law, or are in the process of capturing the law. And they've just about destroyed the nuclear family. There's one element left standing of the nuclear family. That's children, which probably explains why the left is going after it. So what I do in my book is I name the names behind the people who are responsible for the capture of these institutions, who are targeting our children. I name their names so that we can understand exactly what political enemy we are facing. And then, Sara, I offer a solution that I will admit to you is different than what the Republican Party offers for how we can recapture our institutions and how we can save our children.
What is that?
It's essentially a critique of a strategy that Republicans fell prey to about 50 or 60 years ago. And it's a little philosophical here, but we live in a free country, or a lot of us believe that we live in a free country. But as a Republican Party, as a conservative movement, we've forgotten to ask the question, what does that mean, though? When we say what's a free country, is freedom the ultimate end, or is freedom the means to something greater? And the Republican Party for the last 50 years has embraced the idea that freedom is the ultimate end. The perfect example of this, of course, is when David French said that drag queen story hour, where grown men are dressed up as sexualized versions of women gyrating in front of children, he said that is one of the blessings of liberty, insinuating that there's an inherent morality to it because those men have the freedom to do that. When you and I sitting here as parents know that there's nothing moral about the freedom to do that. That's inherently immoral. It's grotesque. It's evil. And if that's evil, then freedom can't be the ultimate end. Freedom has to be the means to something greater. And the Republican Party has forgotten, philosophically and policy-wise, to explore the idea or acknowledge what is that something greater? What are we trying to order our society towards? When we talk about human flourishing, what does that mean to us? And we have to address that as a Republican Party. I challenged conservatives in my book to think about this, grapple with this question, because if we embrace essentially what's libertarianism, I hesitate to put that name on it because I don't want to turn off libertarians from listening.
Wait, you don't want to turn off Rand Paul?
Message.
You don't want to turn off Rand Paul?
I love Rand Paul, actually.
I know, me too.
I don't like it.
I love him too. No, you bring up such a great point, and I think it goes far beyond the Republican Party. It is every single one of us that espouse to be conservatives or have conservative values. It was the silence of the conservative movement when so much of this was taking place, when we thought, well, we're not going to rattle any feathers. Let's not, stand up to this in our schools. We don't want to upset the principal. It's not that big of a deal. And then that not big of a deal got bigger and bigger and bigger. And somehow we were all asleep at the wheel while the bus driver became the Marxist leader, taking our kids on a ride somewhere while we were like checked out. I don't know what was going on here, but like for 8 hours a day, our children, instead of learning in the public schools the way they should have been, and granted, not all public schools, but a good majority of them were actually being indoctrinated, not being taught, right?
Yeah, and this is one of the points that I make in my book, is that our public schools are obviously being used for indoctrination right now. The indoctrination that they're being used for is brainwashing and Marxist ideology. But the idea of indoctrination itself is a morally neutral concept. There's nothing inherently wrong with indoctrination. It's what's being indoctrinated that determines whether indoctrination is good or whether indoctrination is bad. In fact, the public school system in our country was created to indoctrinate children. Public education has only been mandatory in the United States since 1852. Massachusetts was the first state to make public education compulsory. And the reason that they did that is fascinating. The reason they made public schooling compulsory is because there were a lot of immigrants coming to the United States at that time. And a lot of those immigrants were Catholic. The Protestant politicians who were in charge of our nation at that time wanted these children to embrace American values instead of the values of the country or loyalty to the country that they came from. And they wanted those children indoctrinated in Protestant versus Catholic values. Our education system was intended for indoctrination. Conservatives recognized this at the time and embraced it, but somewhere along the way, we forgot that it was intended for indoctrination, and we embraced this idea of neutrality, that, it should just be used for reading, writing, arithmetic. Sarah, I don't believe in neutrality. I don't believe that there's any such thing as this neutral playing field that's just void of any morals. Either the left is going to control the values in our country, or we are. So we have to embrace the idea that our education system is used for indoctrination. We just have to determine, okay, we know what's wrong. Critical race theory is wrong. Trans ideology is wrong. But what is right? What should we be indoctrinating our children with that will help then form the society that we want?
I agree with you on that, Liz. I think that you're absolutely right. Even as a journalist, when I was working before I started my podcast, before working for Sean, when I was at the newspaper, the Daily Bulletin, or working at the Examiner or at the Washington Times, I always said it is absolutely impossible to be completely objective. When you go into a war zone and you see atrocities, you pick a side. You say to yourself, what am I trying to transmit here? What is the message that I am delivering? And it will certainly be based on, I think, your moral standing, your upbringing, who you are as a person. So you're never going to be that computer, right? And even AI, I think, is being trained by us. So God help us, we don't even know what that's going to entail. But I agree with you on that. So I think, like, for so many parents, it's like, how do we grapple with this? Once we realize, and I'm a mom, I decided I'm putting my daughter this year back in private school before she goes to middle school, in a Christian school that my husband and I both love. I mean, I wish I could keep her at home and I could teach her with me all the time, but we're with her all the time, as much as any parent can be. And we're looking at the books, and and it was funny, you brought up books and you brought up, the teachings. Well, last year there was a book that I guess they gave her at the public school, and it was about how bad, like, the American immigration system was. And Thankfully, it wasn't a book that she was taught in class. It was one that she picked without realizing out of the selection of books. But it was definitely a book that was anti-American, anti-immigration, and our system. And my husband and I threw it away last night. I was thinking about you because I threw that book away last night in the trash. She never read it. We just said, get rid of it. We read the back and looked at it. But how do parents grapple with that?
What's funny?
Go ahead.
What's funny is I read my daughter your book, Club Awesome Sauce. She really likes it. She loves that book.
Thank you.
She's only 2.5, so I don't think she gets the underlying political message yet, but she thinks it's so funny.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love that book too. I mean, because it actually gives kids an idea of like what it means to really care about something, right? What it means to protect their club, to protect their nation, to understand what those values are that make us so beautiful and so great. And we are a hodgepodge of people from all over the world, but we're all here for one main reason, I believe, and that is for our ability to be free from tyranny and, to be able to have a nation that espouses values that I think are based fundamentally on Judeo-Christian values that, those conservative values that make us safe. But it's scary now. I mean, I think for a lot of moms that are listening to us right now, they're scared. They're like, how do I protect my children against a nation where our institutions have been seized by these leftist Marxists? Some of them, I think, are doing the bidding without even realizing they're doing the bidding. It's kind of like a machine that just operates on its own. It's been taken over. How do they handle that? How do we handle that as parents?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just people listening to this show. I mean, it's scary for you as a parent. I mean, you're facing these decisions in school. It's scary for me as a parent. My daughter's only 2.5, so we haven't encountered these institutions yet. She's at home with me all the time, so I've been able to shield her and shelter her from this evil. But it's so scary as a parent to look out there and think anytime she strays more than 10 feet from me, she's going to be targeted by something, whether it's the library or a parade or children's books in the grocery store or television or school or anything. It's terrifying as a parent. That's one of the reasons I wrote this book. I mean, it's not just for parents, it's for our country. It focuses on children because children are the last frontier of the Marxists. They've co-opted and captured all these different institutions, and the children are the last ones. I have a chapter 12, where I lay out a 12-step plan for what we can do as a country to take back these institutions. And I say as a country versus as an individual, because I think one of the mistakes a lot of conservatives have made in the past, really the entirety of the time that I've been politically active, is we think, okay, if we get our own lives in order, if we make sure our families are properly ordered, then it will have a downstream effect to trickle out into culture, to trickle into politics, and that's all we need to do. And while those things are wonderful, you should have your family in order, you should have yourself in order, you should have your church and your community in order, that's not enough. We conservatives have fallen prey to the idea that government in and of itself is inherently bad. We've conflated the idea of limited government with no government, right? Like, for example, Christie refuses to, he's a presidential candidate, of course, refuses to say that government has any role in banning transgender surgery on kids. And his excuse for why he doesn't want to do this is he said, well, we believe in limited government. Well, limited government doesn't mean that you shouldn't use the government, the just authority of the government when it's appropriate. Limited government means it has enumerated powers and it's held accountable by the people. It is limited. It doesn't mean that government is bad. But conservatives often have fallen prey to this idea that we shouldn't use the just authority of government because it's somehow inherently bad. So my challenge in chapter 12 at the end of my book, I have 12 action items that we won't be able to accomplish just on our own. You can't do it on your own. I can't do it on my own. Nobody watching and listening to this can do it on their own. But we can collectively pressure our local governments, our state governments, and the federal government to make these changes using the just authority of government that will prevent the takeover of some of these institutions or abolish the ones that are unnecessary or recapture the ones that we need to move forward with. So it's not just a depressing read about, oh, here's the evil people who captured our institutions who are coming to your children. Have a nice day. Don't have nightmares. No. We established that part in the first half of the book because I think it's very important for us to fully acknowledge the reality of the political enemy that we face.
Right.
Otherwise, if we don't, we won't fight well against it and we won't win. And I want to win. And I know that everybody watching this show wants to win also. And then the second half of the book is, okay, now that we've established that, how do we move forward? And it's a discussion. Again, it's a critique of the Republican Party, but a well-intended critique that talks about this question: what is freedom? Is it the ultimate end, the means to something greater? And what is that something greater? And I offer, Sarah, an answer for that as well. Because people listening to this might be like, okay, but what is the something greater? Like, what is objective truth? Who determines that? How is that set in a political society? I offer an answer to that. And then I offer an action plan for what we can do politically to take back our country, protect our kids.
I think that's brilliant, because you need to give people that opportunity to fight back. You need to give people an action plan. You need to give them tools to say, okay, you've told me this. Now what can I do? How can I make this better? And I like the fact that you brought up Christie and this issue of, especially of underage transgender surgeries and this insanity that we are watching in our modern day. It's so frustrating to me, because I am an advocate for human rights. I have traveled the world. I've seen what has happened to children overseas in countries like Ethiopia, and when they're forced, into these situations that are so horrific. I'm not even going to talk about them here because I'm afraid children might be listening. But especially when it comes to the United States, it's like somehow, because we're putting them in a hospital, they're not even old enough to make up their own minds yet about so much. And then we're telling them, no, this is the reason why. In many cases, it's adults talking children into these surgeries. We're sending them on this trajectory that they can never recover from. And it's a human rights issue. This is human rights abuse. This is an abuse of a child. It is stunning to me that Americans were so easily swayed by this belief that somehow was okay. Folks, MyPillow is celebrating what? Its 20th anniversary sale. And guess what? For Sarah Carter listeners, you are going to get such an awesome deal, such a great deal. I've got MyPillow dog beds, MyPillow slippers. I think if you're watching me right now on Rumble or YouTube, you'll see my new little doggy back there on the couch. Yes, well, he's not that little. He's actually a big lab. He is a puppy, but he's going to be giant. So I got him a giant MyPillow bed. You can get those too. MyPillow robes, so much more. You can also get MyPillow sheets. And guess what? Right now, queen size limited edition of MyPillow's regular price $69.98 is now only $19.98. You can't beat that. And just $10 more for king size. MyPillow.com/Carter, promo code Carter, or call 1-800-685-7221. Go to MyPillow.com/Carter and use promo code Carter to get the queen size MyPillow for only $19.98 during Mike's MyPillow 20th anniversary sale, or call 1-800-685-7221. There you'll find not only this amazing offer, but also deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow slippers, pet beds, blankets, and more. Get the best night's sleep at MyPillow.com/Carter and use promo code Carter, or call 1-800-685-7221. MyPillow.com/Carter. Promo code Carter. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you want to join me and Liz in this fight to take back our institutions, subscribe to my show here on Rumble or on your favorite podcast app, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you. It really does make a difference, and so do you. I think people are starting to wake up. Do you see the crescendo swinging back? I mean, do you see a change right now in America, Liz? I mean, where people are saying, well, wait a minute, you know what? Enough's enough. This has gone too far. And maybe it is because it's because of the children. Maybe that's what's waking people up. I don't know.
Oh, definitely. I tell people often that I've never seen an awakening the way that the American people have been awakened since not the beginning of COVID, but the end of COVID. Whether that's government tyranny based on COVID, all the lockdowns and the masks and the vaccines, et cetera, or whether that's the other evil ideologies that they tried to slip into our society under the guise of people being too fearful about COVID to be paying attention. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat, a conservative or a liberal. 80% of adults in this country don't want grown men, even if they identify as women, to be playing in women's sports. That is the overwhelming majority of people. You'll hardly find any issue on which there is such consensus. And yet the media and Democrats pretend like that Republicans are the fringe minority on this. And it's simply not true. There's an enormous consensus among parents that they don't want these things for their children. That's why we've seen parents take over school boards. It's why the left is ratcheting up their attack on children, because they see the strength of the parents. It's why the FBI called parents who were challenging school board members domestic terrorists, or whatever it was, extremists that they called us. It's because they understand that we pose an existential threat to their Marxist agenda. This is their last chance. This is the last thing they must capture in order to topple the civil institutions that undergird our free society. If they can do that, then we have lost the United States of America. So they know they cannot stop. And yet parents are standing in their way like never before. And going back just for a second to the Christie stuff. I mean, you used a phrase, I think, that accurately describes this. You said it's child abuse. And that's exactly right. And it's a point that I like to remember to bring up, because our society already has laws against child abuse, right? It's not a violation of parental rights to prevent a parent from brutally beating their child or starving their child or neglecting their child. We as a society collectively acknowledge that that's evil and that's wrong, and the child deserves protection from that. So this is not a new idea that I'm proposing to order society towards the something greater, using freedom as the tool towards that. We have a lot of laws on the books already that are aimed at the moral formation of children. For example, children aren't allowed on the floor of a casino, not because it causes them any physical harm necessarily, but because we as a society have collectively agreed that that's not a good thing, a healthy thing, a moral thing. So this idea that I'm proposing is not new. It's actually our constitutional legacy, because our Constitution was rooted in the idea of ordered liberty and not libertarianism.
You're right. And let's bring that up. We don't give our children a pack of cigarettes and say, hey, great, good luck.
That's right.
You want to try it out? Well, you've been wanting to smoke, so here you go. Take a carton. Hopefully you're okay in the end. We don't do that to our kids. So that's why I'm so stunned. Every time I think of this, it's like, when did this happen? This transformation where all of a sudden we woke up one day, it like crept up on us. Some people said we were like the frog slowly boiling, and all of a sudden we were boiling and we woke up and we're like, whoa, wait a minute. And how did it creep through? Do you think it was because, and I'm sure you touched on this extensively in your book as well, but because of COVID, because all of a sudden parents, and you had just mentioned this, were watching what their kids were learning, because now they were at home. And the parents were able to see what was going on in the classroom for the most part. And they were probably just like, wait, what's going on? I know I learned about Disney during COVID because my daughter would be at the Catholic school. And during COVID, she was home with me, and I'd let her watch Disney. And all of a sudden I saw things on there like advertisements for the Radical Monarchs, which was like an offshoot of the Girl Scouts or something, where your kids were radical and they can go protest, and then they can be, they can join gay parades. I was like, I didn't even know that Disney had those advertisements. And I was thinking, this is what our children are being indoctrinated into. So is that the moment you think where parents woke up? Or are we still waking up?
I think so. And let me tell a little story here on my husband. So when my daughter was born 2.5 years ago, and I tell the story because I don't think that this is a story that's exclusive to us. I think a lot of families have experienced this. When I was pregnant with my daughter and she was born, she was a COVID baby. She was born in January of 2021. We obviously had the conversation that all new parents had, like, what's her life going to be like? What do we want to do for schooling? I'm very partial to homeschooling because I was homeschooled. So even before the COVID stuff, even before critical race theory, I think homeschooling is great. I always wanted to homeschool her. He went to a public school and he had a good experience in the public school. And so he was like, oh no, we'll send her to the local public school. And I was kind of like, over my dead body, we'll send her to the public school. Do you know what happens in these places? They'll trans her. And he goes, not in this one though, not in our small town, not in our neighborhood public school. And at the time, we were just kind of like, well, it's 6 years until she needs to go to school anyway. Like, what difference does it make? We'll talk about it later. But I think that feeling that he had which he's since realized isn't accurate. But that feeling that a lot of people had that it wasn't in our neighborhood. Maybe it happens out in California, the land of fruits and nuts. Maybe it happens in New York, so liberal, that you can't even be conservative there, but not in our town, not in our school, not in my child's classroom. I think parents for the first time realized that this actually had infiltrated as close to home as being in your own home through Zoom school. And it was so shocking to people that they almost couldn't believe their eyes. They were home from work or working from home, so they did the research themselves. And once they realized that, they were like, politics aside, I don't want my white child told they're racist because they're white, or my black child told they're oppressed because they're black. And I don't want my sons and daughters told that, they can be a girl if they want to or a boy if they want to. That's just plain wrong. Even if these people were not, even if these parents were not particularly politically active to begin with, we know in our guts what's right and what's wrong, what's moral and what's evil. And we all recognize it at the same time.
Yeah. And police always warn, make sure you don't let your children have their computers in the room. You never know what's going to happen. Somebody could hack. Somebody could be infiltrating one of their games. There are predators out there. Those predators are everywhere. And all of a sudden I was like, yeah, there are predators out there. It's not just in their rooms. It's in their schools. That's just,
yeah.
You're right. Because I was like,
it kind of gives me the chills to think about that because it's so grotesque.
It is. And your husband is like, well, you had homeschooling. So you came from the perspective of like, I did great. My parents were wonderful. I loved being homeschooled. But for those of us that went to like either private school or public school, we're innocent. If we went to a good one, back then we're kind of like, oh, but it was okay. It was all good. And we're not thinking like, wait a minute, it's different now. We are literally exposing our children to some really monstrous ideas that devalue who they are as human beings, spiritually and physically, that have taken away from them their ability to really cherish and love their country, their family, where it's embarrassing now for some kids, like to even understand like I think that, even as, and I'm going to go back to my past, where we would be embarrassed of our parents because of their music or something, or mom, don't kiss me in front of everyone. It's, I'm a big girl now. Well, now you can see it in some kids where they're just completely separated from their mom and dad, completely separated from their church. They're very alienated and alone. And I guess as we wrap this up, there's a lot of children that are suffering out there, not because their parents don't love them, not because their churches don't love them. It's because the message of 8 hours a day of indoctrination, a different kind of indoctrination, like you said, into this new world has really taken away their ability to connect with the people that love them.
The Marxists call it radical alienation. It is their goal to radically alienate children from their families. It's the way that Marxists want to destroy the nuclear family. That's why they're targeting children. They're intentionally, what you described is an identity crisis within children, and they're creating this intentionally. They come in first with critical race theory and say, even if you're a white child, even if you have no bad feelings or bad thoughts against anyone of any other race, it doesn't matter. You enjoy white privilege because your opportunities are built on the back of white supremacist institutions that came before you. There's no way for you to redeem yourself. It's based inherently on the color of your skin. This creates a horrible loathing for children for their parents, because it's their parents who gave them the color skin, right? You inherit your skin color from your parents. And then trans ideology swoops in and offers a sort of redemption, says, hey, you can actually throw off your identity as an oppressor and put on the identity of a marginalized if you choose this transgender identity. But in doing so, it radically alienates the children from their parents, because the children have to reject their parents, reject who their parents created them to be, essentially who they were created to be via their parents. And in the process, it secures these children as at least leftists, if not neo-Marxist revolutionaries for now to kingdom come. It's so evil, it's so convoluted that it would be hard to believe if we haven't seen it happening in front of our very eyes.
Bingo, Liz. I'm getting your book for so many people. I'm going to make it a gift. I'm doing it. Where can I order it? Where can we order it? I know everyone who's listening right now, I've got chills. I know that this is mama bears and papa bears, right? It's about families getting out there and even if you don't have kids, fighting for the values that make our nation so great, that make us prosperous, that make us whole. You know, we want to live in a society where our children are alienated and suicidal and tearing each other apart, where a government is in charge of our lives? It would be antithetical to everything our founding fathers established when they came to this beautiful land and established this great nation. I'm going to get your book. I'm telling you right now, I'm getting it for so many people on my list. All my kids are going to have your book, the ones with kids. Every single one of them. And then
Thank you.
And then my kids who don't have kids are going to get your book. And we're going to make sure the older ones.
I appreciate it. Listen,
it's perfect.
We have to save children for the sake of their individual souls, but also because if we allow the left to capture them, it's the end of our nation. You can pre-order my book. It's out in just a couple of weeks, but you can go to hideyourchildrenbook.com, or you can also go to Amazon or Barnes & Nobles or wherever books are sold. But hideyourchildrenbook.com, and it'll be in your mailbox in just a couple of weeks. I'm really excited for people to read this. I know it's a little bit different than a lot of other books out there. There's a little bit more challenge of the way that Republicans have handled issues, but I think people are going to like it. I hope they're going to like it. And I guess you'll have to read it and tell me.
Liz, I hope you come back on the show. You're brilliant. I love watching your show. And for all of the Sara Carter listeners, please watch Liz Wheeler. If you don't already, I'm sure many of you do. But if you don't, please go see the Liz Wheeler show. She's awesome. And, you know, we got to support our women, got to support each other. We have to, especially in this crazy day and age. I mean, we got to be there for one another, and we got to be there for our country and our families. And so I hope you come back on the show, Liz. And congratulations on your book. Great. Good luck with it. It's going to change the world. I know it. I love it because you put so much effort into this and you talk about it all the time. So bless you.
Thank you so much. I'd be happy to come back. You are sweet, and I've enjoyed every moment of talking to you. Thank you for having me.
I want to thank Liz Wheeler for being on the show again. Liz, you are always welcome and invited to come to the Sara Carter Show. Folks, visit her at the Liz Wheeler Show whenever you get a chance, or on Instagram and on Twitter. It's brilliant. Together, we are going to make a difference. Together, we are going to save this nation because we are waking up. Yes, we are waking up, and we are not going to allow our nation to be stolen from us. If you love today's show and you want even more of the Sara Carter Show, make sure you rate this podcast 5 stars and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on Twitter at Sara Carter DC. And while you're running around the kitchen and taking care of stuff around the house, follow me on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our nation. God bless all of our children, that they may be safe from these insane Marxists. And God bless the great state of Texas.